There we go. Okay, so everyone has an agenda, I believe, and another document which is more of a summary on search techniques. You can put that aside, but you might want to refer to it later as a reminder. So we're going to start, and I guess we'll start by me asking for keyboard control. That would be good, huh? And okay, great. All right, so I'm going to start with the routine number 16, process my tasks. So when you all get back to your desks, or if you're following along on another screen on your own session, that's fine too. You're going to use process my tasks. And this is actually a search routine, but it's a search that is hard-coded to find all of the tasks that are assigned to you. And in this case, I'm impersonating Tracy, who's logged in, and he has, a bucket of DTSs here to test. So when you're on this screen, there are a few things I want to point out about this screen. One of them is this little depressing piece of information over here in the upper right-hand corner that will always tell you how many tasks are assigned to you. And when I say assigned, in an individual task or DTS, you can be the principal assignee, but you also can be, any task can be assigned to more than one person. So there'll always be a primary or a principal assignee, and then there will be an unlimited number of other assignees that can be added. And we'll talk a little bit about the best way to use that, and Tracy has had some experience with that, and we've talked a little bit about that. So at the right time, we'll talk a little bit about sort of procedurally how you want to manage that.
And Lynn, just a second, but
yeah.
Everybody, some people will have tasks, some people will not have any tasks at this point in time.
Okay.
Some people, they may just be that someone else is doing the main testing, and they'll assign them out to you if
okay.
Before we as a secondary assignee. So
All
some
right.
people who are in at this point.
Okay. So if you don't have any, don't take it personally. Just count yourself lucky. Okay, so something else you may notice if you are logged in and looking at your own list of DTSs, over on the left-hand side in this little narrow column, there may be some check marks. There probably will be some check marks. Tracy does not have any check marks. If he did, this number here there would be a count. And because he was the person that converted all that DTS documentation from the Meditech website into Task Plus, he was the last person to edit these tasks, and that's why his check marks have gone away. So just as a review, when you have a check mark on a task, it simply means that the last person to edit the task was not you since you've last seen it. So it's going to be very typical if you have 45 tasks assigned to you that you're going to have 45 tasks checkmarked. As soon as you begin to even look at your tasks and read your documentation, those check marks are going to start to go away. If someone assigns you a task that wasn't on your list before, that task will have a check mark. So it's just a way of kind of alerting you to something that you might want to have to pay attention to. Okay. Some other things to point out about this screen, I refer to this a list of functions at the top as the verb strip, and I know several NPR applications use a convention like this. We're not going to review every single verb on the verb strip. Your default is enter edit task. That is what you'll be using 95% of the time. We will, after we look at an individual DTS, we will talk about a couple of these other functions or verbs that you might find useful. I also want to mention this group of fields at the bottom of your screen, which we call the preview pane. So as I move down through the list using my up and down arrow keys, it's a little hard to tell, but this little preview pane is actually changing because it's reflective of the some of the additional fields in that particular task. I will also mention, Tracy, if it matters, this preview pane is customizable so that if there were other fields that you wanted to be readily available, even from the list. It's basically an NPR report that you tie to your access group, and it's something in a 15-minute phone call I can help you with if that's interesting to you. Okay, so for navigating, I'm using my up and down arrow keys. I can also use my page up and page down that will jump 10 at a time. I can also use my Meditech top and bottom function keys. So F8 takes me to the bottom of my list. F7 takes me to the top of my list. So those are pretty standard, Meditech functions. So the sort order right now, Tracy has gone to the trouble of finding all of the top DTSs. That's what they used to be called. Now they're referred to as release highlights. And it's actually a good enhancement that Meditech's done on identifying the DTSs that are, quote, the top DTSs, because it's a lot easier to find them now. And when we open a task, I'll point that out as well. So all of your tasks are already default sorted by priority, and that's this little P column right here. That's the priority column, and the priority of D is the sort of the default. That's vanilla. And then as we talk about an individual DTS and what the priorities mean, you'll see that there is an opportunity to reprioritize your DTSs, and many of them have already been reprioritized because they are release highlights. Okay, so let's actually jump in, and it really doesn't matter which task I'm going to pick. So I'm just gonna come down here. Let's see. Well, I'll just do something here. Okay, so I'm opening up one of these DTSs. And Tracy, did you tell me you guys actually don't use lab? And do you have like a different?
Yeah, our lab is merged.
Yeah, okay.
Assigned to me in the lab.
Yeah, okay. So what we're looking at now is an actual task. Is there a question? Okay. And I'm going to just go left to right here and top to bottom to talk about the individual fields, the fields you can ignore, the fields that you might want to be really paying special attention to as a tester. The first field, which is not editable, is the task number. It's unique. It's probably the least important piece of information about this DTS because it's a task number. It's not the DTS number. The DTS number is embedded in your title. So when we convert these DTSs from the Meditech website, we construct a title for you, and that title is the DTS number, which is in the newer format. If you haven't done an update in quite a while, this might look different to you than what the way the DTS numbers used to be laid out. So this LIT-2201 is the actual. Now they call it a JIRA ID or a DTS number. And then we construct this title with a followed with a / followed by either an E or a C. In other words, when we're parsing this DTS, we can actually tell whether it's an enhancement or a correction. So we're going to embed that little piece of information right there in the title for you. So if you're like, let's just say you're prioritizing not only the release highlights, but you're also saying, oh, gee, I really just want to look through my enhancements first. Then, we'll talk about later when we do searches how you can sort of go ahead and do a search on your module and only pull up the enhancements. But because you can see it in the title, that's also a pretty easy way to access them. And then after the E or C, followed by a /, and then that will be what is considered the Meditech summary statement. And as much of that as we can fit into our fixed length title. Okay, so that's how the title is constructed. The next group of fields, this is the work group, and this is what helps to secure the system. You won't have any reason to change it. Everybody, I believe, is in the ring work group, so it's like a user security group. It sort of has overlap with that. So if for some reason you're finding you open a DTS and you can't edit some of the fields that you should be able to edit, check with Tracy. Chances are maybe that you're a newer user and you haven't been put into the ring user security group, and you need to, that will fix the problem. The type will be basically the module, and if we were to click in here and do a lookup, you would see all of the modules, the task types are as modules here. And then the priority, and this one has been reclassified as a top DTS. I'm going to just blank that out and do a lookup here and talk a little bit about the priorities, and Tracy will jump in here as well. Many of you will notice that a lot of your DTSs are at the default, and that's because when we convert a DTS, we really have no idea how important it is to your organization. And at that point, once you start working on a DTS, that priority may stay the same throughout its life, or it might change. And what are some of the reasons that a priority would change? One is that it's a release highlight, and so that already has been taken care of for you. So anything that's been identified as a release highlight is now categorized with a priority of C for testing sooner, and those will sort higher up in your list. Other things that could happen to a DTS that would cause you to change the priority, kind of going in the opposite direction. It's a feature you don't use. So you might drop the priority down and come back to it later if you have time, in case you think, oh, we don't use that feature, but we've been talking about using it, so maybe I should test it. But I'm going to do it later on when I have some time. And then I'll direct your attention to the top two here. As a tester, if you encounter a problem with the DTS that you're testing, then you kind of have a couple options. One is to say, oh, well, this isn't working correctly, but it's not a big deal, or we have a workaround for that, or it's been broken for a long time already and they said it's fixed, but it's not really fixed. That never happens, I'm sure. So, you might decide, okay, I'm going to raise the priority up to minor bug, and then we'll talk a little bit about other things that you would be doing in terms of alerting, people in IT about that so they can open a task with Meditech. And then, of course, the major bug will delay live date. That's what we often refer to as the showstopper. So those are incredibly important, to get people's attention, especially if you've got a major problem and things are crashing and burning all over the place. Tracy, is there anything else you want to say about priority while we're looking at this list?
No, the high, medium, and low probably you won't use at all. It's just those top ones.
Okay, so A, B, C, D, E.
Because the bottom ones were more for regular tasks.
Okay.
Kind of IT.
Okay.
For the ring release. So much.
All right. Any questions from the group about priority? Okay. I'm just going to put that one back then. The requester information you can really disregard. That's usually the person who's doing the converting or the project manager. So you can pretty much ignore that. So far in this top area, really the only thing that you might find yourself changing is the priority. We're going to take a look here at this little tiny window. This is where we stash the actual Meditech documentation. You can get in here a couple of different ways. If you're a keyboard person, you can use your F1 key. You can also use your mouse and double click and open up the window that way. And here's what may be familiar to you is the Meditech documentation. So you can see here, here's the ID, which was put into the title, the application. Here's your synopsis. That's the other piece of the title that we construct. Here's how we know whether it's a correction or an enhancement. And actually, I want to comment that there is a third flavor now you know, forever and ever and ever. And I'm one of those people that's old enough to know how it used to be. But there's now a third type called documentation. And I'm mentioning that because, and it's one that we'll do as a search example a little bit later. Because you might want to say, well, you know what, I want to go find all of my DTSs that are just documentation, and I want to read them and close them and just be done with it. So those are, you know, depending on the way that you work. But that's where we would identify that. And then also features. Features is a really important line to pay attention to, because with our search engine, all of this text is searchable. So if you're trying to organize your testing, and I know that's a radical concept, you know, instead of just taking the DTSs in numerical order as presented to you, you might say, well, you know what, I really want to focus on a feature, like I use the example in pharmacy of the dispensing machines. You know, so if I'm testing in pharmacy, maybe I have a particular person in mind who's really good with the dispensing technology. So I'm going to hand over those DTSs to that person that have to do with dispensing. So again, when we get to the searching, we'll talk about how you might gather together within a module certain DTSs that use a certain feature and grab those and offload them to a different person. Make sense? I'll take that as a yes. Change involves, here's where Meditech has decided to stash this phrase, release highlight. So if they've identified a DTS as a, quote, top DTS, which is the old terminology, they're going to stash it in this particular section of your DTS. But we can, again, and Tracy did this, we can search for that phrase, release highlight, pull up all the DTSs in the project, which is what he has done, and then batch update all of those DTSs to a higher priority, so that, you know, those are the ones probably as a group that you're going to want to go through first. And then as we scroll down here, we've got the change details and the system impact. So you're not necessarily going to see steps to test, but you might. And, you know, each DTS, of course, will be different. Any questions about the way the DTS documentation is laid out before I go back? Okay, so to get back to this main screen, I used my escape key. You can use your F11 key. There are, you know, different ways to return from that window. You're generally, I think the standard should be that you wouldn't actually do any editing in that window. You want to keep your documentation pretty much untouched. The place that you're going to be putting your own testing notes will be here in this window, and we'll get to that in a minute. The next field that this brings us to is the status. Status is a really important field. It basically says where in the life cycle are we for this DTS. Priority told us how important the DTS was, but status tells us more about, you know, has it just been assigned? Is it open, being worked on? Is there an issue that we'll have to come back to it post go live? Are we waiting on a vendor action? Are we waiting on an internal user decision? Are we, you know, have we opened a task with Meditech? So these are more horizontal, if you want to think of it that way, where we're identifying where in the cycle this particular DTS is at the moment. In a perfect world, your task will start out in a status of assigned, and it's assigned to you. You will move it to open as you begin doing your testing. Everything will work swimmingly, and you will do your documentation, and then you will bring it to a status of completed. So completed, of course, implies happy ending. Okay, if you complete a DTS, and Tracy, you might want to jump in here to talk a little bit about process while we're staring at this list. But if you're completing a DTS, the implication is that it worked satisfactorily. Is that pretty much how you would want people to?
Information, and you read the information and it's good to go and you just close it.
Yeah. Okay. You know, so things in the meantime are going to be perhaps in a status of Meditech or a status of wait vendor. Wait vendor would be waiting on some other vendor. You know, you probably have a lot of different vendors. You know, what do you guys use for dispensing technology? Do you have Pyxis or Omnicell?
Omnicell.
Yeah. So, you know, there might be an issue with Omnicell, and so you would use the wait vendor status to indicate that you've maybe opened a query with that vendor. And then these on the live date and post go live, these are things that say, well, you know, this DTS is fine. I've tested it, but there's something we have to do on the live day. So I'm not going to complete it. I'm going to identify it with this status of on live date. Is that the right way to say that, Tracy?
Yes, so if it's something that we're going to need to change a parameter, or it's a new dictionary entry or something that won't exist until live day,
Right.
or you can't build it live until live day, or you need to activate it on live day, then we
Right.
mark all those on live day, what our work list is.
Great, yeah. And as is true with searching text, all of these dictionary entries are searchable and reportable. So it's extremely helpful to, you know, the Go Live team to, you know, be able to say, okay, the day before live, let's pull up everything that has a status of on live date. And we're going to get those, you know, that work organized for the Go Live. Okay, any questions from the group?
The other thing I want to discuss is post go live. If you have something that there's a change and it's going to require more than 4 weeks after this starts.
All right, who's?
Somebody put us on hold.
Okay, if someone's put us on hold. Okay, you know what? Okay, thank you. I was about to mute everybody, but okay. Go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, so basically on the post go live stuff can be something like that you want to look at after we're live. Don't need to do it before we move this code in.
Okay.
It's something we could do, but we don't have to do right now, or we don't have time to do right now. So you just put it in post go live status. Then we can run a list of all those and kind of look at them after the live day. If there's a project that needs to come out of that to do something else new. You won't use the reminder or the recurring or the template. Those are for regular tasks, not really for these.
Okay. Great. Okay, so I'm gonna put it back in a status of assigned here. And then I mentioned earlier that we have a principal assignee, and then there's an area where you can put an unlimited number of other assignees. So if you open a task, you might find that your mnemonic is here, which means you're kind of you're the main person testing this. Or you might find that you're one of these other assignees, which might mean that the person who's primarily responsible for this DTS has added you in order to have you do some specific piece of testing on this. So that's again, sort of procedurally, and I'll let Tracy jump in at some point to talk about that handoff sometimes between the person who's primarily responsible, but then often, you know, if I'm doing certain kind of testing, I need a certain type of patient admitted. So I might add the admissions tester on to the task to say, can you please admit this type of patient for me so I can do this test? So that's something to consider. In this case, there are no other assignees yet on this task. The start date and the target date, start again was just defaulted because you guys are beginning the project. The target date is usually like a week before the go live, sort of assuming that all the individual DTSs need to be tested, so you have some time for integration testing and some, you know, last minute issues that need to be dealt with. And what is your go live, Tracy?
28.
Yeah, so you guys have a week of catching up and integration testing, I guess. The where it says enter go live issues, Control F2. Again, you could use your Control F2 if you're a keyboard person. I can double click into here, and you guys have a pretty robust customer defined screen. So just like in other NPR applications that have customer defined screens, we also support that functionality. So this is a customer defined screen you guys have used in your previous Meditech updates, so that if someone in IT opens a task with Meditech, they're going to record that task number here. Customer defined fields are also searchable and reportable. So anything you enter here can be looked for in the search. And these flags, like menu changes, this is a yes, no, parameter change, yes, no. This one here is really important. Does this require retraining? You as a tester, and this is kind of my pep talk to testers as a trainer myself, when you are done testing this particular DTS, you are the best person on the planet right now to know whether the functionality of this particular feature has changed so much that people who use this particular function or feature are going to have to be retrained. And so that is a really important assessment for you as a tester to make. And if you're not positive yourself, by all means, you consult with other people to do that. And that can be then searched on as you're getting closer to go live. The training coordinator, the person who's trying to put together a training plan, can very easily then search the entire project for any DTS where someone answered capital Y to that query. Does that make sense to people? Okay. And then the same, go ahead.
You just said to all of nursing that this screen is going to look a little different now.
Okay.
And it could be something very simple. We want to say yes to that just so that we know any amount of education needs to be done. If doctors need to know that this screen now pops up with something slightly different than they've seen before, because we've made changes in the past that really seem very insignificant, and it's come back to bite us, so we try to send out notifications, everything.
Great. Great. And sometimes maybe that's the change you're referring to, Tracy. I've had a lot of customers who have a kind of a drop down here for like memo, classroom, one-on-one, because it's like you said, sometimes you don't need to haul everybody into a classroom necessarily, but you may have to put out a fairly detailed memo.
Right.
So yeah, so something to consider there. And then, of course, is there a parameter change, a dictionary change, a change in policy or procedure? And that's another one that's really important because of, requirements around, your peer review when you have the Joint Commission and they're looking at your documentation. It's always worth asking, is there a manual somewhere sitting on a shelf that we're going to have to update? And this is probably more so true in the financial, well, it could be anywhere, I guess. I was thinking clinical, but then I thought, oh, financial too. So, again, that's another thing to kind of in your mind as you're wrapping up your DTS testing. It's like, do we have some documentation somewhere that's no longer going to be correct? What is this IOH? I'm not really familiar with that.
So basically, if we're waiting on staff in another department, you can say yes there and put who you're waiting on. Okay. So if you have a question to your supervisor, you're the tester, and you need to ask your supervisor about it, you can kind of put that information in there. And it's something we can go run. Once you get your answer, you can clear it out. But,
okay, good. All right, and this one here, which, is also just useful information. So before I exit out of this screen, any questions from the group about this? Okay, and again, I'm going to just, and here it'll actually coach you F12 to bring you back here. If I had actually put something into one of those queries, there'd be a little asterisk there now. So that will just let me know that there's some data in that customer-defined screen. That brings us to our testing notes. And again, I can click into the field, double click, I can use my F2 key, and I'm now in a split screen, which allows me to enter my notes. And it also, once I file, it will protect those notes. So this is an editor in the format of what we call append only. So to start, I would hit my escape key, and now I'm down in a window where I can actually type some documentation. And when you do that, the system will actually stamp your notes automatically with who you are and the date and the time, which is very useful because, you know, as more documentation gets in there, it's really easy to see who wrote and when this particular documentation was created. And when I'm all done, of course, I can hit my escape key and I'm back here. And of course, if I had typed anything, I would have an asterisk here as well. Okay, the project, it's an editable field, but of course you won't want to edit that. That's one of the ways that Tracy will do reporting. He'll, you know, be able to gather up progress on all the different modules in the project. So that's pretty important to not alter that in any way. Okay. So those are what I call the bones of a task. And so what I'd like to do now is, did you guys track your time ever when you were doing DTS testing?
Right. Just so when somebody says, how many hours do you need? But I've never had it out real well for it.
Okay, because if you press your F4 key and it's mentioned on your agenda, you can log time. So if you care to, you're certainly allowed to do it, and there are reports, nice reports that you can use. But, you know, if I spent, you know, 4 hours today, you know, I can do something like this, and the system will calculate the minutes. It puts in the date, the time, and who I am. I can make as many entries as I want. The system will keep a running total. So some of you might, in particular, whatever particular situation you find yourselves in, your supervisor in your department may have said, you know, I'd like you to really keep track of how much time you're spending on testing. And, you know, so sometimes that's mandated as, you know, for the whole project and everybody on the testing team, and like, everybody, please log your time. And it doesn't have to be, you know, to the minute. You know, you can eyeball it. You know, I've just been reading documentation for the last hour, and I would even go as far as to say, if I spent the last hour reading all of my release highlights documentation, I wouldn't necessarily feel like I had to go into every single task and put in 5 minutes. I would just open up one of my tasks and put 1 hour. Because usually when people are trying to gather statistics about the resources required, how much time, they're usually interested by the user or by the module, not really by the individual DTS. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's just my pep talk for that. If you're feeling like that's valuable information, don't feel like you have to like put 6 minutes on this one and 2 minutes on that one and 4 minutes on that one. You know, you can say, you know what, today I spent, you know, 6 hours testing, and I'm just going to drop that 6 hours onto the most recent DTS I've been working on. And that's going to be good enough for government work, as they say. Okay, and F12 will bring me back to this screen. Now, if I press my F12 key at this point, I'm going to be saving any changes that I made. If I don't want to save any changes that I made, I'm going to use my F11 key. So again, these are conforming to your normal Meditech function keys, F11 to exit, F12 to file. So I'm going to use my F11 key, I think. Why is it not doing that? That's funny. I'm wondering why that F11. Okay, well, I'm just going to use the X then to exit. For some reason, the F11 key has been hijacked to do something different, so I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm back to my list. And I want to talk a little bit about a couple of these other verbs on the verb strip. The added task is for creating a new task, and we'll talk a little bit about that toward the end of the class. The print task may be important for you because you may open a DTS and the documentation goes on for pages, and you're thinking, I'm never going to understand this DTS. I need to print it out and mark it up and highlight it and do all that other stuff. So if you find that you need to print out a DTS, then you can highlight that DTS. You can come over here to print task, press your enter key. It'll ask you what form do you want to print. And I'm going to suggest here the one that's going to make sense is number 3, print.all, which prints the whole task, including any internal notes, any customer defined fields. Right now there's nothing, and then I would use my usual print on view here, and it's just very boring. It's just going to be a print version of what's in the task at the moment. So you can print that out the way you would normally print any NPR report out to be able to work on it and mark it up. Okay, so that's print task. The change verbs I'm going to caution you on, because any verb that has the word change likes to do things in batch. And the way that it knows what you want to change in batch is if you have a check mark next to the task. So if I purposely wanted to change this task, and I'm using my right control key to put that check mark on, this task and this task, and I wanted to change the assignee on that task, on those 3 tasks, I'm going to use the change assignee verb instead of going into each task individually to make the change. So when I hit change assignee right now, it's going to ask me one time for a new assignee, and then it's only going to change the tasks that are checked. So what I want to caution you about is don't use these to change the task you have highlighted if in fact you have things checked, because it doesn't matter where my highlight bar is. If I have things checked, that's what these verbs want to do. Okay, and that's an easy mistake to make, and until you have cleared your check marks, these verbs could be potentially quite dangerous for you. All right. Okay, and I'm going to clear my check marks by using Shift Right Control, and again and you have your icon here. This check mark all is a toggle, and that will check mark everything or clear your check marks. I do want to point out this review activity. This is an audit trail. Every DTS task maintains an audit trail. So I'm going to highlight one of the tasks and just print that. Again, I'm just going to print on view. It's a little report, essentially. And it's going to show me the history of this task. So we see that the history is on the 10th of June. The original task was created, so it went from nothing to something. And then you can see here on the 13th, that's when Tracy changed the priority from a D to a C. And then the assignee changed from this user to this user on the 24th, which was today. Okay. So as you work on your DTSs and you change priorities and statuses and add notes and things like that, these audit trails get a little more interesting. The reason that I'm pointing it out to you is if you are working on a task and you say, oh gosh, I don't remember changing that priority. How did that get changed? You can just run this review activity for that task, and it will show you how changes were made and who made them and when. Okay, so it's something you may not ever use, or you may only use very sparingly, but it's a handy function to know about. This is resort tasks. You can change the sort order if you want temporarily. Again, once you sign up, go back to the main menu, come back in, you'll be back to your default sort. This add other assignee, remove other assignee, these are also batch functions. So if you decide you have 37 tasks assigned to you and you want to add a particular person to all 37 tasks as an other assignee, you can, again, check a bunch of things here and then use your add other assignee, and that will ask you one time for a new other assignee, and it will add that other assignee to those check-marked tasks. So those are the specific functions that I wanted to kind of bring your attention to. I think the ones that you will use are the print task and the review activity. Okay. All right. So I've talked a little bit about searching. And one of the things that you might want to do in preparation for your testing is to organize your DTSs a little bit. So I'm going to, oh, that's right. I got it. I'm going back to my main menu, and instead of choosing Process My Tasks, this time I'm going to choose Search and Process. And that brings us to a screen where we can enter all kinds of search criteria. I can search by any standard field, everything assigned to a particular person, everything of a certain type, everything of a certain priority, a particular project, a status, and I can mix and match those things. I can search for a string of text. And again, I can combine that, like I only want to find a certain phrase or word inside a particular module. I can also search on my custom fields. So I'm going to do a few examples, and then if someone wants to suggest some examples, I can help with that too. So I'm going to start with, let's see, which one is it this one here? 32. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start by searching on the current project, and I'm going to come down here and say, I want to find those documentation tasks I mentioned. So I'm going to put type : space documentation. That's that exact phrase, okay? And if I want to even be persnickety about it, I can make my search case sensitive, which means it has to match exactly the case that you see there. And then I'm just going to take the defaults and press my F12 key. And of course, it's saying one required field missing, and I'm glad that happened. The default here is that it will only search your active tasks, and that's usually what you're looking for. If you've already completed a task and you're still looking for some other stuff, you probably aren't interested in your completed tasks being included in the search. Where that will be different is as you get to the end of the project, maybe the person who is planning your go live day activities, they're going to want to, or the training, let's say if a bunch of tasks are completed, but some of them have that retraining yes, no is set to yes. I want to go find all of those. Some of those are going to be completed. So in that case, I would definitely want to change this to a capital Y. Okay, but for most of your searching, you probably only really care about your active tasks. So now I'm going to, I think the F12 key works, yeah. For some reason the F11 is hijacked to something else, but F12 works here. So it's going to search through that entire project, however many tasks there are, looking for that particular expression. And then some other searches that we'll do, I've prepared some other examples that might help you sort of figure out what to tackle in addition to your release highlights. That's taken a while. I forget, how many DTSs are there total, Tracy?
I think it's a little less than 3,000.
Okay. All right. It should be soon. Yeah, there we go. So there are 60, and you notice that they're across modules. I didn't restrict my search to a particular module, but you as a tester might want to do that. So there are 60 DTSs here that are documentation only. So if I just were to open one of these, and this one's assigned to Brittany, and then use my F1 key to open up my documentation, here it is. Does everyone understand how I found that? Okay, great. So, so that's the kind of thing you might want to do right off the bat, is look for your DTSs that are, oh, I keep forgetting that F11 is not. So that's an example of a kind of, whoops, what did I do?
I don't know. Meditech's down at the bottom. There it is.
Okay. Okay. So that's one search. Let me do, old dog, new tricks. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my search, and it's going to ask me, do you want to do the same search over again? And it will default to no, but notice that it remembers my previous search. So if I wanted to refine that search, I don't have to re-enter all the stuff I entered before. So I can clear my previous search with my cursor at the top. I can do Shift right Control, and that will clear the search, so I can start over again. So I might want to, for example, in pharmacy, so I'm gonna pull up as one example here. Okay, so I'm going to search all of the and pretty much, because I think, Tracy, you told me you closed all of the old tasks, so I'm not necessarily.
Nursing.
Pardon?
I said I thought I did, but I found some in the nursing. So
okay, then I'm just gonna restrict my search to the project. Okay, so my initial search, I'm just gonna say I'm curious. I want to find out how many pharmacy DTSs there are. So I'm gonna put my project, I'm gonna put my type, and it'll go out, and it will hopefully shortly. Not sure why this is so slow. Okay, 324. Okay, so then I might say, you know, I'd like to actually drill down and only pull up the pharmacy DTSs that have to do with my dispensing machines, because I have somebody else in the department that I'm going to offload those to. So I'm going to go back and refine that search. And so here again, it's remembered what I put in before, and now I'm going to come down to my string search, and this, there are different ways that Meditech does this. The old way, in their features, they used to do this, but they also will do this. So when I put things on multiple lines, that's what we call a logical OR. If I have multiple things filled in, that's what we call a logical AND. So in order for a task to be found with these criteria, it has to be in this type, in this project, but it can be either one of these expressions. Everyone with me on that? So I'm just going to take the defaults here, press my F12 key, and this time it's going to further refine that list. So instead of the 324 pharmacy DTSs, I'm now going to have a shorter list. There we go, 29. Okay. So I don't know if there's anyone who is the pharmacy tester in the group. Is anyone?
Yeah.
Okay, so if in fact you were, like you say, yeah, I wish I was so lucky that I could offload those, but I'm just using this as an example. So if that were the case, and I could offload these particular, and let's just see why these came up. I'm going to open one of these and look at the notes and see where the dispensing, here it is, dispensing machine. Sometimes it comes up under features. But every time, so as you start to read through your DTSs, you're going to get a pretty good feeling for the list of features that are relevant for your module. So sometimes you'll just find it in the description. Sometimes it'll come up as a feature. So that's, there's something you can experiment with. And let me go back. I'm going to remember to do this instead of F11. Oh, there we go. Okay, so in reality, I won't, of course, do this, but I could check mark my whole list with Shift Right Control, and then I could change assignee, right? Or I could add other assignee. If I didn't want to give these up, if I wanted to remain the principal tester on these, but I'm adding a person on there and that person is going to do the dispensing piece of that testing, then I could very quickly add that person to all 29 tasks at once. It's important that people understand this, so don't hesitate to ask a question if you want to do that. And just remember that you might have muted yourself. So, any questions about that strategy? Okay, good. A couple of other search examples maybe to go with, to think about for organizing your testing. I'm going to clear my previous search, and this time I'll pick on a different module. Let's say scheduling. So that will be number 10 here. Okay. And sometimes I know with scheduling, I know that somebody came on early who does the surgery testing, surgery scheduling. So within regular scheduling, surgery scheduling is often kind of a subset of that. So when the DTSs get downloaded, if I wanted to pull out just ORM, I might want to search for ORM in the title, because you'll notice in a lot of your DTSs on those summary statements, they actually do a pretty good job of putting the mnemonic of the submodule. That's also going to be true in order entry with departmental, DPT. So if we, and I could make this case sensitive. In this case, this is a good example because I want to find ORM only as a capital uppercase. And here's another little trick. I want to find it in the title, but I do not want to find it in the request notes, in the actual Meditech testing notes. I only want to search the title. Okay, so now I can use my F12 key. I'm searching just within scheduling, but I wanted to find only those scheduling DTSs that have to do with OR management. Okay, and again, that might be another opportunity, unless it's already been done, to do a check mark all, a batch change assignee, or a batch add other assignee. Is this making sense to people? Somebody say yes.
Certainly.
Okay, great.
You want to check those T keys ones and show them how to change an assignee? All those T keys need change to KCAC.
Oh, okay. All right, so let's do that. You're going to make me do some work, eh?
Those are old ones.
Okay. Whoops. Come on.
Oh, are they in a different project? Yeah. Never mind.
What?
Those are from the old.
Are they? Okay. All right. Never mind. So another example here might be if you know those are old, you could batch update those, change the status to, completed prior release or whatever you do. But so are people understanding this is a great opportunity for you to organize, parts of a module, especially because sometimes Meditech does blend what you think of as different modules. So community-wide scheduling is very different than surgery scheduling. And so you might want to, split out those DTSs and, get those off to the right people. Now here's another really important search, and maybe then we will have beat this to death. And like I said, that reference document that I gave you has examples. You cannot hurt the system by searching, so it's good to practice, get comfortable, and the more you read your own DTSs, of course, the more familiar you're going to become with the terminology, with the features, that kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to, let's pick a different module. So I'm going to clear my search with Shift Right Control, and I'm going to come down here, and let's just do, what should we pick on? I'll just pick on abstracting. And this time I'm the abstracting tester, and I know that Meditech has about 6 different ways of saying that there's no testing required. Okay, so that's another quick thing I might want to do right off the bat, is find all the stuff that says no testing required and read the DTS and complete it. And then my manager will be so impressed that I've gotten all these DTSs done. So, and you guys are, those of you who've done this before, you probably know what those expressions are, and I've put them in that resource document. But it's things like no testing required, no testing is required, testing not required, and here's my favorite. Is these familiar to people?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I've got 4 different flavors, and there are actually more, but we'll
add your project on.
Pardon?
Add our project on there. The task
Oh,
project.
yes, good idea. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we got the project. We're only looking at abstracting, and you could look through the whole project, but then we'd have to talk about the weather for a few minutes. So I figure we'll just restrict it to one module. I'm not going to make it case sensitive, so I'm going to take the defaults here and press my F12 key to file my search. La-di-da. And, you know, oh, no tasks. Okay, so that's too bad. That would have been nice. And I kept this as an OR here, which is the default. So I'm looking for, you know, anything that has one of these expressions. You know what? I wonder about, there's another one I've seen. No steps to test. Are people remembering that one? Let's find a different, let's try a different module. Let's see what we get. There we go. Okay, so in bar, one of those expressions came up. So let's just go open up the testing notes and see what we see here. Okay, there it is. Everyone see how we did that? So that's another good one. And, you know, again, I would say most of the time the expression is going to be no testing is required or no testing required. But it doesn't hurt to put some of those other expressions in there and see what you get. And again, if it were me, I'd want to find those right off the bat. This is an interesting combination because this is saying it's a release highlight, and yet you're not going to be testing it. So it sounds like it's an important piece of information.
We wouldn't be doing it anyway because we're not converting to 6.1.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, you know, that's another thing to search then, you know, is maybe to search for the expression 6.1 in your documentation. And you may get a lot of false hits on that, but again, with the more that you can think of maybe that isn't relevant to your upgrade, you might be able to find a lot of things. Another example would be, since you guys use Omnicell, you might want to search for any DTS that references Pyxis, and then you can get those out of there. you know. Does this feel like you've had enough examples? Do you feel like you've got a feel for how you might each go about your searches?
I think so.
Okay. And then last but not least, so I'll clear that search. If you're getting close to the end of your project, so I'll come here to the project. I won't actually run this search because there won't be anything to find. But if I go down here to my query search, here are all the queries, query mnemonics from your customer defined screen. Okay. So the person who's trying to put together the training plan is probably going to be interested in this particular query being a yes. Whoops, a yes. So if I wanted to gather those up at the very end, and really important here, I would probably do that, because as I'm getting to the end, many of the DTSs are completed. So I want to make sure I find anything with a yes to that query, whether or not it's completed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then that list might be something I'll want to do a printout, or or if I'm the training coordinator, I might want to then add myself as an other assignee on those DTSs so I can find them and work on them. Okay. So I think that covers most of the kinds of searching that you might want to be doing. And then at the very we're just about wrapping up here. The one last thing that I'm just going to show you, because Tracy mentioned that in addition to getting a handful of DTSs, or more than a handful of your own DTSs, there will be situations when you might have to create a task and you're thinking, oh gosh, I have so many tasks I wouldn't want to create anymore. But you might encounter a situation where something isn't working correctly in your module that has nothing to do with the DTS you're testing. And in that case, I think Tracy is saying that you'll want to create a task.
Going through the workflow testing, and you find something odd, and we need to question it, or we need to talk to Meditech about it, and you don't see it wasn't something you were working on as a task, you can create one so that we can track that problem.
Yeah. I'm also going to mention customs. Do you guys have any customs?
Some, yes.
Okay. My advice as an old Meditech IT manager from a long time ago is go out and get that list of customs off Meditech's website for your hospital and sort them by module and make them available to everybody. So, because sometimes customs have been around so long, people forget that they're customs, and then it's some of your most fragile code, and it's likely to break. So I would advise you to get those customs and even create a task for every custom so it gets tested. And you could even create a task type called custom, and get those in there, get them assigned to the people that should be testing them, and make sure. And I could be preaching to the choir here. I just want to mention that. So you can add a brand new task using add a task here, and I can just do N for new, and it's going to generate the next available number, and then I can put in here, let's say I wanted to add some of my customs. You could create a standard where you do something like this. I'd pay a lot for that custom. And then put it in your ring work group. And if you wanted to add a task type in here for customs, or you could agree that you're going to use your DTS dot, whatever that module is. You know what, I'll just do this for now, and then you can repurpose this task, Tracy.
Okay.
All right.
That's fine.
I might consider this to be kind of important, so I'll maybe put that as a 3, and then my my documentation here would be what I would be putting in to explain what this custom does. So, you know, I would be putting in, you know, this custom, da, 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 okay? And then I would then assign that to Tracy. Oh, come on. So I'm going to assign that to Tracy. All right, and that's it. And I'll F12 to file. And, you know, it's going to give me a list, and, you know, do you want to go and do all these other things? No, actually, I just want to file. Thank you very much. And it's filed, and now it's on Tracy's list. Okay. I did that kind of quickly. Everyone comfortable? You can also use the main menu function, enter edit task. We'll do the same thing. That will give you a blank task. You do N for new. It'll give you the next available number, and you can proceed to document. And I gave you examples in your agenda of things, of reasons why you would create a task. Another common one is that you as a tester might want to have your own sort of laundry list task. You know, things that you just don't want to forget about that need to be looked at. And so you could just create a little administrative task for yourself that's like just a random catch-all things that you just keep dumping thoughts into as you're working. So that's another common one. All right. Thanks for hanging in there. We're done a little early. I have plenty of time. Any questions for me?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. Let me know if there's anything that comes up that's odd or people have questions. And thank you all. And I'm going to stop the recording.